March 6, 1944, 28,000 feet above Nancy, France. Hauptmann Wilhelm Meyer saw the lone P-51 Mustang flying straight and level below him, silver wings catching the morning sun like a gift wrapped in aluminum. His three Focke-Wulf 190s dropped into formation behind him as he pushed the stick forward, diving at 400 miles per hour toward what looked like the easiest kill of his career. The American didn't even turn. Before we dive into this story, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, whether it's Berlin, Texas, or Tokyo. These stories take us back to moments that changed history, and sharing them keeps these memories alive. Now, back to the sky above France. Meyer positioned his gun sight, finger hovering over the firing button. 3 seconds to weapons range. 2 seconds. The American still hadn't moved. Then 3 more Mustangs materialized from the sun above him like angels of death. And in the span of 5 heartbeats, Meyer watched his wingman disintegrate in a cloud of aluminum and fire. His element leader took 20mm cannon rounds through the cockpit and tumbled earthward, trailing black smoke like a funeral shroud. Meyer survived only by diving through his own flak batteries, the anti-aircraft fire less terrifying than what waited above. As he landed at his base 30 minutes later, hands still shaking on the throttle, Wilhelm Meyer understood something that would echo through Luftwaffe intelligence reports for months to come. The Americans weren't fighting like pilots anymore. They were fighting like a machine. And machines, he realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with altitude, didn't need to be brave or skilled. They just needed to work. In the spring of 1944, the Luftwaffe had every reason to believe they owned the sky on an individual level. Since the Spanish Civil War in 1936, German pilots had refined their fighter doctrine through 8 years of continuous combat, longer than any air force in history. Their swarm formation, 4 aircraft flying in 2 pairs with tactical flexibility no other nation could match, had been tested in the skies over Madrid, Warsaw, London, and Stalingrad. More importantly, they had the kill counts to prove it worked. Erich Hartmann, the Blonde Knight of Germany, had 352 confirmed victories. Gerhard Barkhorn claimed Sembiling Yi. Gunther Rau tallied Lambeitsche Wohl. The Luftwaffe counted over 100 pilots with more than 50 kills each. By contrast, America's top ace, Richard Bong, would finish the war with 40. The numbers seemed to validate everything German fighter doctrine promised. Train pilots to be individually superior. Give them freedom to maneuver. Let skill decide the fight. German fighter training in the early war years consumed 13 months and emphasized aerobatic mastery, energy management, and deflection shooting, the art of hitting a moving target from a moving platform while both planes maneuvered in 3 dimensions. The goal was creating pilots with what Germans called Fingerspitzengefühl, fingertip feeling, instinctive understanding that separated competent pilots from lethal ones. Every German fighter pilot was trained not just to survive, but to become an ace. Even by 1944, when fuel shortages and instructor losses had forced Germany to reduce training to as little as 4 months, the doctrine remained unchanged. Quality over quantity. The knight over the peasant. American pilots, by contrast, seemed almost deliberately mediocre to German eyes. Their training lasted just 6 months and emphasized formation, flying over individual maneuvers. They flew rigid finger-4 formations that looked more like parade drills than combat tactics. When engaged one-on-one in early 1943, American pilots often broke off combat and dove away rather than fighting. 2 Luftwaffe aces who'd survived years of combat. This seemed like confirmation of what they'd always believed. Americans had excellent equipment. The P-51 Mustang was admittedly a superb aircraft, but they lacked the warrior spirit necessary for air combat. They were technicians, not fighters. But Wilhelm Meyer's report, filed on March 6, 1944, contained a line that intelligence officers would see repeated in dozens of after-action summaries over the coming weeks. The Americans are no longer fighting as individuals. They execute coordinated maneuvers with mechanical precision, leaving no opportunity for superior skill to matter. What Meyer had encountered was the final evolution of American mutual support doctrine. A tactical system so simple it seemed stupid, yet so effective it was systematically killing Germany's best pilots. The system worked like this. 4 fighters flew in 2 pairs. The lead pilot's job was to attack enemy aircraft. The wingman had only one job: protect the lead. Not to score kills, not to maneuver independently. Just to stay in position and shoot anyone who threatened his leader. When German pilots attacked what appeared to be lone American fighter situations that should have been textbook kills, they found themselves being attacked from positions they hadn't expected by pilots they hadn't seen, executing coordinated maneuvers that left no room for individual initiative to matter. The contrast revealed fundamentally different philosophies of warfare. German doctrine asked, how do we create the best individual fighter pilot? American doctrine asked, how do we make average pilots effective in combat? Germany's answer required 18 months of training, natural talent, and years of combat experience to develop. America's answer could be taught in 3 weeks. Stay with your leader, watch his 6 o'clock, shoot anyone who gets on his tail. Don't chase kills. Don't break formation. Trust the system. To Luftwaffe aces, the American approach was almost offensive. A mediocre American pilot in the right position could kill an ace focused on a different target. Individual skill, the very quality that defined a fighter pilot's identity, meant nothing in this system. The Americans had removed honor from air combat and replaced it with industrial thinking. The same assembly line logic they used to build trucks and refrigerators. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, a Luftwaffe ace with 28 kills, described his frustration in a report filed in April 1944. They fly like truck drivers. No initiative, no creativity, just following procedures. But they keep coming, and there are always more of them. He was right. But truck drivers following procedures were proving more effective than knights seeking glory. The tactical implications showed up in the statistics with brutal clarity. In early 1943, Luftwaffe fighters achieved kill ratios as high as 7-to-1 against American fighters over Europe. By mid-1944, after American pilots had fully adopted and refined mutual support tactics, that ratio had collapsed to barely 2-to-1, and in many engagements, Americans were scoring more kills than they lost. Not because American pilots had become better individual dogfighters, but because the system made individual excellence less important than positional discipline. A German ace with 50 kills, diving on what looked like an easy target, would be shot down by that target's wingman American pilot with perhaps 2 or 3 victories, who did nothing creative or skillful. He simply stayed in position and executed his one job. The ace died. The truck driver survived. And there was always another truck driver. The Luftwaffe had no effective counter. Their entire tactical doctrine was built around individual freedom to engage targets of opportunity. Requiring German pilots to fly in rigid formations would negate their greatest advantage: superior individual skill. But allowing them to maneuver freely meant they were being ambushed by Americans who stayed in mutually supporting pairs, covering each other's blind spots with mechanical precision. Major Heinz Bohr, a Luftwaffe ace with 220 victories, circulated a memo to his squadron in May 1944 that captured the dilemma perfectly. We cannot beat them by being better pilots. They have made being a better pilot irrelevant. What Meyer and other German pilots didn't fully understand was that while they were being killed by American formation discipline in the sky, Luftwaffe High Command in Berlin was reading intelligence reports that made the tactical picture even worse. The numbers were crushing. In 1944, American training schools were producing approximately 65,000 fighter pilots. Germany, with its longer, more intensive training program, was producing fewer than 15,000. America was losing pilots who took 6 months to train and replacing them faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. Germany was losing aces who took 18 months to create and couldn't replace them at all. The mathematics were industrial, not martial. Germany needed every pilot to be an ace because they couldn't produce enough pilots. America didn't need aces because they could produce unlimited, adequate pilots. One side treated pilots as irreplaceable craftsmen. The other treated them as interchangeable components in a machine. And you can't shoot down a production system. By April 1944, the Luftwaffe was issuing directives that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Avoid combat with American fighters unless absolutely necessary. Focus on the bombers. Don't chase individual victories. Preserve experienced pilots. The predator had become prey. The human cost showed in the faces of German pilots who survived into late 1944. Lieutenant Gustav Radl, aged 23 with 98 kills, wrote in his diary after a mission on April 18th, "We are being hunted by men who cannot match us in skill, but they hunt in packs with a patience we cannot afford. We kill one and 2 more take his place. We cannot kill them fast enough." He was shot down by a P-51 wingman on May 2nd, the American pilot. Second Lieutenant Robert Hayes had 3 kills to his name. Hayes never saw Radl as anything more than a black cross in his gun sight, a target threatening his flight leader. He fired a 2-second burst, watched the Focke-Wulf 190 trail smoke, and returned to formation. In his after-action report, Hayes mentioned the kill in a single sentence. Radl's death barely registered as significant because, in the American system, it wasn't. It was just a function being performed. The comparison to industrial workers was more accurate than the Germans knew. America had approached fighter tactics the same way it approached manufacturing. Design a system that works with ordinary people. Make the system reproducible. Train people quickly to execute the system. Produce enough people that losses don't matter. Accept that individual components will fail, but ensure the machine keeps running. Colonel Hub Zemp, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, explained the philosophy in a lecture to newly arrived pilots in March 1944. "You're not here to be heroes. You're here to keep your leader alive so he can complete the mission. If you chase a kill and leave your leader exposed, you've failed even if you get the kill. If you never fire a shot but your leader comes home, you've succeeded." It was a radical redefinition of what it meant to be a fighter pilot, and it worked precisely because it made the fighter pilot less important than the system. German aces were still scoring kills at impressive rates when they got opportunities. But opportunities were vanishing. Every American formation was a trap. Every lone fighter was bait. Every dogfight was a coordinated ambush disguised as individual combat. By summer 1944, the Luftwaffe had effectively lost air superiority over Western Europe. Not because American pilots were better individual. German aces still achieved higher kill counts when they survived long enough, but because American tactics made individual ace-level skill increasingly irrelevant. The sky belonged to whoever could put more aircraft in the air, keep them coordinated, and replace losses faster than the enemy could inflict them. The Luftwaffe's response to D-Day illustrated the collapse with painful clarity. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces flew 14,674 operational sorties over Normandy. The Luftwaffe managed 319. German fighters that did take off were instructed to avoid American fighters entirely and focus only on ground attack missions where they wouldn't face coordinated fighter opposition. The greatest fighter force in the world had been reduced to hit-and-run attacks, fleeing from combat with opponents they could have outflown individually. General Adolf Galland, commander of Luftwaffe fighter forces, submitted a report to Hermann Göring in July 1944 that contained a sentence remarkable for its honesty. "We are losing the air war not because our pilots lack skill, but because skill alone cannot overcome systematic numerical superiority executed with adequate discipline." Göring, predictably, rejected the assessment and blamed pilot morale. but the pilots knew. In the ready rooms and dispersal huts across Germany, veteran aces spoke in quiet voices about the Americans who flew like robots, who couldn't be baited into mistakes, who didn't care about individual glory, who just kept coming in their perfect formations, watching each other's backs with mechanical precision. Hauptmann Wilhelm Meyer, the pilot who'd been ambushed on March 6th, was shot down and killed on August 4, 1944, near Strasbourg. His wingman reported that Meyer had successfully maneuvered onto the tail of a P-51, was lining up the shot, when another Mustang he hadn't seen the first Mustang's wingman fired from his 6 o'clock. Meyer died doing what German doctrine had trained him to do, pursuing individual victory with superior skill. His killer, First Lieutenant Thomas Crawford, had 5 kills. He mentioned Meyer's death in 3 sentences of his after-action report and noted he'd stayed in proper position throughout the engagement. 3 months after Meyer's final mission, Luftwaffe High Command held an emergency conference reviewing fighter tactics and losses. Internal assessments captured after the war showed German leadership understood they faced numerical disadvantages that tactical superiority could no longer overcome. The recommendation was to adopt a defensive posture to preserve experienced pilots for some future moment when Germany might regain the initiative. The recommendation came too late. By then, the Luftwaffe had lost air superiority, lost the ability to defend German cities from daylight bombing, and lost the strategic initiative. Not because they lacked skilled pilots, but because skill alone couldn't overcome a system designed to make skill less important than teamwork, discipline, and numbers. The irony was bitter. Germany had created the finest individual fighter pilots in history, men whose names would be remembered for generations. But they'd created them for a war that no longer existed. War where individual knights fought individual duels, where superior skill guaranteed victory, where courage and honor meant something beyond cold mathematics. America had industrialized air combat the same way they'd industrialized everything else, and in doing so, they'd made heroes obsolete. Today, every air force in the world flies some version of the tactical system America developed between 1942 and 1944. The basic building block remains the element to aircraft. One leader, one wingman, with the wingman's primary job being protection rather than kills. Flight leads are still taught to trust their wingmen to watch their blind spots. Wingmen are still evaluated on their ability to stay in position rather than their individual kill counts. The mutual support doctrine is so fundamental to modern air combat that it's taught in the first weeks of fighter training, as natural and obvious as checking your 6 o'clock. The Luftwaffe's emphasis on individual ace development has been relegated to historical study, remembered as tactically impressive, but strategically obsolete. Because what America understood in 1944 remains true 80 years later. Wars aren't won by the side with the best individual warriors. They're won by the side that builds the best system and produces enough people to execute it. The German aces were legends, individually more skilled, more experienced, more lethal than their American opponents. But they were fighting a system that had industrialized survival, made teamwork more valuable than skill, and produced replaceable pilots faster than Germany could kill them. Erich Hartmann, with his 352 victories, could kill an American pilot every single day for a year, and America would still have more pilots. The mathematics were that simple and that brutal. In the end, Germany learned what America was built different men not on a single day, but through hundreds of encounters where German pilots discovered that individual excellence couldn't overcome systematic, disciplined numerical superiority executed by ordinary pilots who trusted their wingmen more than their own skill. The side that created aces lost to the side that made aces unnecessary. Wilhelm Meyer's words, written in his after-action report on March 6, 1944, became an epitaph for an entire generation of German fighter pilots. They are fighting like a machine. He meant it as criticism. He didn't understand it was a compliment, Machines don't need courage or skill or honor. They just need to work. And the American machine worked. The sky above Nancy, France, is quiet now. No fighters duel in the thin air at 28,000 feet. But if you listen to the way modern fighter pilots talk about mutual support, about staying in position, about trusting your wingman more than your instinct, you can still hear the echo of that March morning when a German ace realized his skill didn't matter anymore. The Americans had won by making heroism irrelevant. That lesson remains the foundation of fighter tactics 80 years later. Proof that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy's strength, but making their strength meaningless.